foundation was doing well. We were helping to rescue kids, all this beautiful things, but my personal life was a disaster.
You know, you work really hard for 20 years and you know, the results don't come in business right away. It's not like a paycheck. It's not like you work a week and you get paid for a week. When you're in business, you could work a year and get paid nothing. Or maybe you're in debt because you're borrowing money.
After clearly identifying what I wanted in a relationship, that very night, I found out some things that caused me to text my attorney and said, I want divorce papers by tomorrow. Welcome to another episode of the Liberating Humanity podcast. I'm Paul Hutchinson, and today I have a very special guest, one of my dearest friends. We've only known each other for a few months, but from the very first second that I met him, we became fast friends. In fact, he is so much like me in so many ways, and our journey has been very, very similar. So excited to talk about liberating humanity from financial burdens, from emotional burdens, all kinds of different things that hold us back. This man has had some years with 8-figure incomes, guys, like 10 million a year plus. And a lot of us are like, wow, wouldn't that be amazing to get there? Well, it comes with some challenges. And it comes with some principles that you need to live by to be able to get to that point. So we're going to talk about success. We're going to talk about breaking free of self-limiting beliefs. We're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff. So help me welcome today my good friend, Brad Sumrok.
Thanks, Paul. I'm really excited to be here with you.
You know what I love is your hat and your shirt that you have at your conferences that says, some rock, some don't.
That's right. Some people rock and some people don't. And you rock, Paul. And you all of you out there, you rock.
So Brad has, Brad's one of the reason I wanted Brad here on the show is that he not only has created massive success for himself, but he has dedicated the majority of his life for the last few years in teaching others to do the same. And so what was it that transitioned you from building and let's talk about that transition, how you got started, and then creating something that benefits literally thousands of people and helps so many people become incredibly successful?
Sure. I mean, look, if it wasn't for people that were generous enough to spend their time mentoring and teaching others, I probably would still be in corporate America. So that was my path. You know, my father never finished college. He worked for an engineer, and I would hear stories as a child how my father's boss was taking his family on an airplane to Hawaii as we were driving from Pittsburgh to Lake Erie for our annual summer vacation. So I studied engineering because that's what my parents encouraged me to do, and my recipe for success was study hard, get good grades, get a degree or some formal certification, and get a job. And I did that a few times with an engineering degree and an MBA. And after struggling in corporate America, trying to climb the corporate ladder, getting fired once, getting laid off once, and found myself in my early 30s, I decided to seek out specialized education through seminars and conferences. And it was Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the Cash Flow Quadrant that gave me that epiphany of being a business owner and investor as opposed to employee. And so I went to a real estate investing seminar, and I remember day one, I was very skeptical because I'm thinking, what are they trying to sell me? The seminar itself was $500, and my friends actually made fun of me for going to the seminar. And day one, I was in the back of the room like this, and somehow everything the guy was saying made sense. And day two, I was in the front row taking massive amount of notes. And that's how I got into real estate investing, specifically multifamily buildings. And so I've done a lot of multifamily buildings over the years. And as I started becoming financially successful, I started getting interested into becoming more personally successful. And so I went to my very first Tony Robbins event. And here I am with thousands of people all committed to like up leveling their life. And I'm looking at Tony and I'm thinking, here's a guy that makes, talk about 8 figures, here's a guy that makes 9 figures, now arguably 10 figures, and he's doing seminars and teaching people. And so it occurred to me that like there's a saying that says people that can't do, they teach. And I don't agree with that at all. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
I have. I don't think that you should learn from somebody that doesn't have the fruit on the tree. You
Right.
know, I tell people all the time, there's so many people online that are talk, but they don't walk the walk. You know, everybody can be a mentor to you in some way. I have friends that they're mentors to me in business because they're incredibly successful in business, but they're in their third marriage headed for a divorce. So I'm not going to take advice from them in their personal life, in their relationship life. But yes, it's so important to identify mentors who have
actually
the fruit on
do
the
it.
tree. Yeah.
Right. And I have that saying too. I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk. So I do the buildings and then I share with other people how I do the buildings. And I've created the whole education platform around that. And the way I think about this, Paul, is doing buildings puts money in my bank account. But when I do seminars and then I have a mentorship program and a mastermind and I see and experience one of my mentees that had no experience or that was struggling to scale, and within a few short years, they're either retiring themselves and their spouse from their job, buying their dream home, paying for private education for their children, reducing their taxes, and just having a better overall quality of life, that puts deposits in my soul.
Yeah.
And so there's the buildings that put the money in the bank account, and then there's the education component, which I've really dedicated more than a decade of my life, this past decade since 2013. I do both, but I'm actually more passionate and more juiced about doing events and conferences, even if it's a free event to a paid mastermind.
You know, when I was a kid, I had some posters on my wall. It had some Ferraris and Lamborghinis and nice houses, and I had a saying that said, "He who has the most toys wins." Right? And that motivated me for a long time to hit it. I now have one that says, "He who has a powerful, positive impact in the most lives wins." And I think that you can have a balance. It's not just being a Mother Teresa. You can create a life of abundance, and in doing so, create good with everybody around. I remember when we were building Bridge, we had a philosophy that we didn't want to be a scumlord, you know, just figuring out how to get the rents higher and squeeze all the money. We wanted to be a landlord with our apartments that was creating real value in the lives of everybody, a true win-win-win-win. For example, you know, we had big apartment complexes that were in areas that they were primarily Hispanic. Sure. That were living there, right? So we had a lot of Hispanics that were living in these, Latinos that were living in these apartments, and we realized that a lot of them had these tennis courts that hadn't been used in years, right? They have 4-foot weeds in them, nobody was using them, and we sat down and we thought, you know what? Let's put ourselves in their shoes. What would be valuable to them? We realized that, you know, our Latino community, a lot of them didn't play tennis. They love soccer, you know? So we cut down the weeds, we took down the nets, and we put little soccer things inside there, created little soccer leagues. We brought in English as a second language and the bookmobile, and we took this big section that in the beginning, a lot of our properties that we bought had big opulent offices for the staff. And we're like, okay, guys, we're still going to give you a nice office. You don't need all this square foot. We're going to cut it down. This other half, we're going to turn it into a tutoring area with some cute computers and stuff for after school for the kids, creating it a really good place to live without, I mean, we're not putting gold towel rods in a B-class neighborhood, right? But by putting ourselves in the shoes of the tenants, we created a win for them. We also created a win for the banks. You know, in the 2008 crisis, we were there buying properties from, I mean, huge portfolios from banks that were ready to go under, but they needed some liquidity. So we create a win for the banks by giving liquidity. We create a win for the tenants. We create a win from our employees. We literally scaled from just me and John to 4,000 employees by the time I retired, right? So we're creating a win there. And our investors, we were the #1 performing real estate investment fund in the country of our size and vintage while I was there with John. So again, it was creating value for others. And you not only did that, you took it a step farther. You say, not only am I going to create value with the properties and my tenants by leading it right, I'm now going to take all of that knowledge and teach other people how to do the same. And that's one of the things that I respect the most about you is where your heart is there.
Thank you. And it's incredible because I have a mentorship program, for example, where people, pay of an investment to be in that program. And so those people, I work with a lot of those people. I know those people, but there's others that maybe they heard me on a podcast, or maybe they heard me at a free meetup group, or maybe they came to one of my mentoring, one of my 2-day events, and they didn't join my program. And then 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, I run into them somewhere randomly, and they just come up to me, and so many times, and they just say, like, Brad, I don't know if you even know me. Like, I heard you speak, and you really inspired me. You really changed my life. For some people, it's like I joined your program and I had success. For other people, it was like, hey, you really motivated me, and I just want you to know that, like, it was you that got me started in this journey. It was you that got me started in real estate. So literally, yeah, it's been like, if I add up all the folks that have changed their lives, it's thousands, and maybe I'm selling myself short. Maybe it's tens of thousands. And then I think about their families and their families' of people that have been positively impacted financially. And look, and I'm sure we'll get there, being financially free does not solve all your problems, but it sure makes it easier to deal with when you are going through some of the problems. And so that's one of the things I tell people is, like, when I was married, I would say, hey, my wife and I, we disagree and fight about a lot of things, but money is not one of them.
That makes it nice. There's a lot of people that end up in divorce because of financial challenges. I say, a friend of mine, a mentor from when I was young, he said, money's not everything, but I rank it right up there with oxygen. And we laugh. Oh, yeah, that's ranking it too high. No, try to go without oxygen for a little while. Your life's gonna suck. Try to go without any money for a while. It's difficult, right? And the perception of money, I think, is important. It's money is simply a tool of exchange. You want to make $10 million a year or more, create $10 million worth of value in the lives of others, and you deserve to be compensated for the value that you created. Right? You want to make $100 million a year, create $100 million worth of value. People are like looking at people like Bezos, for example. You have all this money. Guess what? Creating Amazon was a really amazing. Bezos created Amazon, right? Just making sure I'm okay. Okay. So why? Because I literally save so much time in my day going click buy, right?
Right.
Because I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about 5 different stores and whatever else. Yeah, it costs me a little bit more. Yeah, it's going to put a whole bunch of money in his pocket. But he created value in my life, and I'm okay with every single person who has created value in my life getting fairly compensated for the value they're creating. And so, changing your understanding of money and saying, okay, if I'm not creating the lifestyle I want, how can I create more value in the lives of others to increase my lifestyle? Don't get mad if somebody else is flying in a jet if you're sitting and watching TV every night eating bonbons, right? My mentor early on, he told me, he said, Paul, he says, your television is an electronic income reducer.
I love that.
So I took an inventory of how much time I was sitting in front of the boob tube, and I'm like, okay, there are times where it's important. You know, the times I need to relax or hanging out with my wife or whatever else. But if I'm spending hours every day just turning off my brain and not being productive, then I can't sit here and complain about somebody else's lifestyle. I remember in my early 20s, I was working a job and I was building my company at the same time. I was like burning the candle at both ends. And I had to wake up and be at work at 6 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes I was getting home from some of my business meetings almost at midnight. You know, I was just working. And I remember I was so tired and I'd roll down my window just to keep myself awake. I'd say, "Go ahead and sleep, losers. I'm going to be a millionaire." Right?
It's true. I mean, people think like all of a sudden you're an overnight success. You know, you work really hard for 20 years and you know, the results don't come in business right away. It's not like a paycheck. It's not like you work a week and you get paid for a week. When you're in business, you could work a year and get paid nothing, or maybe you're in debt because you're borrowing money. And so it's more challenging. And then at some point, if you are able to persevere and have a valuable product or service that the marketplace values, and you know how to package it and market it and communicate it to the world, then you could be, for me, much more successful than I was working for somebody else in a job. But I remember, Paul, when I started, I still had a job and I started doing my multifamily investing. And when would I look for deals if I had a job? So I looked for deals over lunchtime when my friends went to lunch. Then after work, they would go to happy hours, and I used to be in that crowd. And they would go to happy hours, and I would go and drive by the deals. And on the weekends, they would go on the lake and invite me. And that's when I said, "Well, I'm going to this seminar for $500. And they were laughing at me. And then, you know, 3 years later, I have more income from my buildings than I do from my job. And I quit my job. And one of my friends, I'll never forget, he goes, "How did you do that?" And I said, "Well, do you remember all the lunches that I stayed in and the happy hours that I forewent? You know, I didn't go anymore, and the weekends that I wasn't with you guys on the boat." And so there's a cost in the beginning.
Absolutely.
But that's what a lot of people don't understand, is they think it's like instant, you know, you're going to go to a seminar and get a coach and then all of a sudden have instant results.
I had a mentor that had a 24-hour clock. He says, "Okay, we all have 24 hours in our day, every one of us. You, me, everybody else." He said, 1/3 of that, 8 hours a day, is you know, resting or getting ready to rest or whatever else. Then you've got another 16 hours there to work with. He said, and in the beginning, as you're building your company or your lifestyle, he says, you got to pay the bills. You got to keep your foot, as Robert Kiyosaki said, in that employee or self-employed, you know,
Sure.
that while you're building your business, your investment side. And so that other 8 hours, now that leaves another 8 hours a day of discretionary time. It's what you do with that discretionary time that makes all the difference 3 or 4 years from now. If you're the type that's like, "Hey, you know what? My discretionary time, I like to just chill out and hang out at the pool and watch TV." That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't be mad 5 years from now when you're not in the same place that somebody used that discretionary time differently, right?
Sure.
And that discretionary time isn't just the time after work. It's the commute time. Like if you're on a bus, if you're in a car, whatever else. If I had a mentor that said, "Paul, your car should be a university on wheels. If you're not on a phone call or doing a business deal or whatnot, educate yourself." I taught this at one of your conferences. Your most valuable piece of real estate you'll ever own is the 6 inches between your ears, right? You develop that, then everything else is better. Well, how do you develop that? Well, you don't have to go to college for another 5 years. You can literally develop that every single day with audio programs on business and success and finance and relationships and all of these things. You can become a superstar. In fact, if you listen to an audio program every day, at least an hour a day, and you read a book at least once a month, then three months from now, nobody will know that you're doing it because you're just getting started. 3 years from now, everybody you know, your inner circle will know you're doing it because you'll have advanced so much in so many areas. 30 years from now, a good part of the world will know that you're doing it because you will have made such an impact in the world because you had developed that.
And I love that because you said 3 weeks and 3 years and 30 years. And one of the other things that has occurred, and it's been 22 years for me on this real estate investing journey, and the growth is not linear. And so it's not like from year 1 to say year 20, it's not like 5% every year. The first 10 years that I was doing multifamily investing, I got up to 1,000 units. And the next 10 years, I got up to 11,000 units. So there's it's like 0 to 10 years is 1,000 units, 10 to 20 is 10,000. So this is like a hockey stick type of business. And I attribute that to the growth that's happening here, right? The relationships that you build, the knowledge that you have. It's not just the income that you make, it's the relationships, the network, the track record, the experience, the confidence, and all those things just make it easier and easier and easier as you go. And that's why I love being in business, is because even if, theoretically, and you see these TV shows and stuff where, undercover billionaire, and they drop somebody off in a city, and within 90 days, they create a $1 million business. And that's entirely possible because it's the real estate in here that enables them to go somewhere else and start fresh and then create something new, because they're not starting from zero. They're starting with all the information, confidence, track record, knowledge. Everything that they need is up here to be successful.
Absolutely. When John and I started building Bridge, took us an entire year to raise $2 million. And half of that was our own, from because we were matching everything that came in. So really, we only raised $1 million, right? By the time I retired in 2017, we were bringing in over $10 million a day.
Wow.
Is what our average growth was. And it was because we had created a track record. We had created the credibility with our investors, and we had places to put it. So everything grew. But yeah, it took a long time. It was, in the beginning, we called it arm-to-arm combat, right? But we just had to have the faith. It was funny. John, people ask him, well, did you guys see it? Did you see the billions? He goes, no, but in the beginning, we literally were in this office. It was so small, we would bump elbows when we turned around. It was just me and him. We were paying like $300 a month for this office for the two of us. Yeah. And that came with internet and a free printer and all this and 2 desks. That's all, right? And we had a deal, I remember, where we needed $25,000 by Friday. And I'm trying to get that extra $25,000, to raise the money. And I hanged up the phone, and I turned around and I put my little pinky right here, like Austin Powers. I'm like, John, we're going to be $1 billion fund someday. And John's like, Paul, we need $25,000 by Friday, right? So, but you have to have that vision of where you're going, but you've got to be willing to make the calls. You've got to be willing to give up your lunch breaks.
Sure.
And what's interesting about our paths that I just realized as we were talking is that Robert Kiyosaki was right in the beginning for me as well. In fact, mine was way, way, way back. I was in my early 20s. I was 22 years old. So this was like 35 years ago, right? And I was introduced to Robert Kiyosaki, and I was told at the time that he had only sold like 10 books, not 10 titles, right? Just barely getting started. Wow. with his very first book. Yeah. And we met him at an airport. I had a friend that had known him, and he said, hey, I want to meet this guy. So we sat down, and Robert actually drew out on a napkin. I wish I had this napkin. I'd freaking frame it today. He drew out the cash flow quadrant, yeah. Right, of the employer, being an employee and self-employed and business owner and investor. Yeah. And then he drew out this, and this really stuck with me. He drew out this thing where he drew this little town, right, and this lake up here, and everybody's walking down this trail to hauling buckets. If you remember that story in one of his books, yeah. Hauling buckets down because everybody needed water to drink and to clean and everything else. Well, and then 2 guys get the contract so that everybody doesn't have to go on there. They're getting $5 per bucket load. And one guy, he's just carrying buckets. He's working 9 to 5, 9 to 5, 9 to 5. And the other one, he starts building a pipeline. Pretty soon, he turns that on. He's earning $5, $5. And my mentor said to me, he said, Paul, you have to ask yourself all the way through as you're building your companies, am I hauling buckets or am I building pipelines? And that's one thing I love about your conferences and what you teach, and how both of us earn money, is that we spent time building pipelines in terms of the real estate. It's the cash flow that's coming in. And then, I still earn money off of those things. I still earn money off of the Sound of Freedom. The movie, that's mailbox, that's a pipeline. You have now a pipeline off of your seminars and your masterminds and stuff. You've created something that cash flows to you, and that's something that gives you time and money both. Because it doesn't do you any good to have a whole crap ton of money and have no time to enjoy it. You're working 14 hours a day just to maintain it. But when you're able to do both, you're able to say, hey, you know what, Paul, I've got 4 or 5 days. Love to come and visit you, and you, boom, jump on a plane. You didn't have to ask your boss.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly how I'm here.
Having that freedom. So yeah, we both started out learning from Robert Kiyosaki, and then I want to move into what we both learned from Tony Robbins, because Tony is so much more than just real estate. In fact, I let you hear Tony actually just sent me a voice message yesterday, and I'm incredibly grateful for the friendship I have with him. And you've been a platinum member for
5 years.
Beginning.
Yeah, 5 years. Yeah.
You're like one of the top level ones that they travel.
Well, yeah,
together.
the group that I was in, it was called the Platinum Lions, and we got to go to Tony's house for 3 days every year. And we would stay at the hotel right down the street from Tony's house, and we would go there from 10 a.m. until like midnight, 3 days in a row, and have masterminding sessions. Wow. Very powerful. Yeah, and I didn't go to Tony for real estate. Like, I already had my real estate thing going. And I went to Tony because, when I first heard him speak, I actually heard him speak for the very first time at a real estate conference where this organization brought in Robert Kiyosaki, Donald Trump, who was famous for The Apprentice at that time, and Tony Robbins, and this was in 2006. And I went to hear Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki. I did not go to hear Tony Robbins. When I first heard Tony Robbins were going to be there, honestly, I was like, I don't even want to see that guy, because I had an association with him selling infomercials like on late night TV. And the way he came across to me on those TV things was not positive. And so I go to the conference to hear the other two, but the one that I felt was speaking to my soul the most was actually Tony Robbins. And I thought, wow, like, I was so wrong about him. And what I believe Tony does even to this day is think about, like, if your life is a circle, like a pizza pie, and you divide that pie into, say, 8 sections. And one could be, your finances. The other could be your career or your job or the mission that you have, like your life purpose. And one could be your family, and one could be your health, and one could be your intimate relationship, and one could be your relationship with God or spirituality, and maybe another is emotional management. Or, whatever the 8 categories are of your life that matter to you the most, how do you expand that? How do you have a better quality of life, and not just how do you make more money? And so that's what attracted me to Tony Robbins.
My whole life changed because of Tony, and I listened to him for years when I was younger. I was just eating up that educational programs. When I was told that the 6 inches between my ears is the most valuable thing I could develop, and my car was a university on wheels. I'm like, okay, what can I listen to? And I was listening to Zig Ziglar and Dennis Waitley and Tony Robbins in the beginning and stuff, and it was just super powerful, and it changed. It helped me realize that I could literally create anything in this life. I just have to be willing to put in the work and truly believe that it can happen. and you can work all day long without that connection from an emotional belief standpoint. It's not going to get there. But you can also believe, and if you don't do any work, it's not going to get there either. You've got to have that healthy balance. And I remember about 6.5 years ago, Tony had called me, and he said, Paul, I know you're friends with some of these other celebrity guys. It'd be awesome if let's bring some of those to one of my UPW events. And I did. So I called up Glenn Beck, and he's a huge TV radio guy, and invited Glenn, and he brought his son to go to this event. And I was successful in business. The foundation was doing well. We were helping to rescue kids, all this beautiful things, but my personal life was a disaster. I was on my second marriage, headed for a divorce. We were fighting all the time, and I remember Tony had a part where he has you visualize a part of your business that's not where you want to be, and he has you write it down in detail, what it feels like, what it smells like, what it tastes like to actually achieve that success. And I thought, you know what, I've used this technique so many times, at Tony events and stuff. I've used it to help build a multi-billion-dollar company. I've used it to help create my foundation, and even to help find the kids, all of these things. But I never used these techniques in my personal life. I had just kind of done whatever, I hadn't gotten really specific. And I thought, you know what, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write down exactly what that woman in my life needs to feel like, and what I'm willing to give. And, this is how I show up for her, and this is how she shows up for me, and this is how we treat each other in public, and all of these details. And I won't go into all the details on here, but long story short, that very night, after clearly identifying what I wanted in a relationship, that very night, I found out some things that caused me to text my attorney and said, I want divorce papers by tomorrow morning.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
That very night. And God knew I wasn't happy, but I never got clear on exactly what I wanted. So as soon as I was super clear on it, I was emotionally connected to it, like Tony has you do, then as soon as I knew exactly what it was, and I had this list of the woman in my life list, then God said, guess what? It's not her. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. I thought it would be. I thought we could make things work there. But I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't got clear what I wanted. Less than 2 months later, I was in Haiti. I met Vanessa, and everything on that list, everything. So I joke and say, I created you, but really, if it wasn't for that experience with Tony, and as you said, it's not just business, because success isn't just money. If you think success is money, then I know a lot of rich people that aren't happy. I know a lot of rich people that I wouldn't say, hey, come and hang out with me for 4 days at the retreat. You're a soul brother to me because of where your heart is, because it's not about the fame and the money and whatever else. You're a good man in your heart, and I can see that you have implemented those things that Tony taught with those 8 pillars, and it wasn't just the money.
Well, and I have, but I feel like there's so much more to go. I'm a living example that achievement and financial success does not make one happy, and I've had many happy moments, and I would say in general, I'm happy. Like if someone would ask me, "Hey, Brad, are you happy?" I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm happy," and almost like, "Yeah, I'm freaking happy." But not right now because there's something on my mind. But then it occurred to me, Paul, that I had more often than not, I wasn't feeling happy most of the time. And I remember even at a Tony event, he had something called a mood meter, and it was a 5-day event. And every hour we had to check in and ask, like 0 was neutral, like you're not happy, you're not unhappy, you're just okay. And then there was 20 levels above 0 and 20 levels below 0. And like at the top number was like ecstatic joy, and at the bottom was like, I don't even want to be alive, and all the emotions in between. And, of course, at the event, when I'm around all these people and around Tony, I'm at a high level of fulfillment and happiness. And then when I go home in a short, a few days after I go home, back to the regular nuances of life, I'm finding myself that most of the time, like the emotions and the moods that you experience most of the time would determine if one is really happy. And it occurred to me that's like I wasn't in a beautiful and positive state the majority of the time. The state that I was in the majority of the time would be more described as like frustration, thinking about what's next. I've been told by, my wife and other people I've been in a relationship and that like, you're always thinking about what's next. Let's enjoy the now. And so for years and years, and even like, when I was winning and I won a lot, I would celebrate with food and drink and shopping or buying something or booking that trip. And when things weren't going well, and I've had moments when things weren't going well, guess what I would do? Consume food and drink because it made me feel better, or book a trip, or go shopping, because it's what they call retail therapy. And so what I realized, Paul, was that from a very, very, very early age, and even I've realized now in the work that I'm doing with you through the healing retreats, is that so many things in my life, I was just trying to fill a void. And so there's healing needed to do. And I always thought I had a pretty normal life and a pretty normal upbringing. Like I wasn't physically abused or sexually abused, and came from a family where my mother and father were together for 57 years and lived in the same house until I went to the university. And so just from that description, most people would say, well, yeah, you had a great upbringing. But there were a lot of patterns and beliefs and things that were missing that manifested in like going out and achieving things or checking things off of a list. And that never really fulfilled me.
I know exactly how you feel. And I do. We've talked about this.
Yes.
Of how those Zig Ziglar and Dennis Waitley and Tony Robbins stuff, it gave me the motivation to build and create success. But sadly, when you get to the top, sometimes it's lonely. Everybody's like, oh yeah, Paul, oh Brad, and it'd be so cool to be you, and all the cool parties and the cool big events and whatever else. But then we go back home and we're like unfulfilled because we were out of balance in some ways in our life. And I've seen some incredible transformations with you over the last few months alone, in you trusting us in the process of some of these retreats. And I'm grateful that you trusted us enough, because in the beginning you're like, oh, Paul, I don't know about this stuff. But it helped you have an entirely new perspective on so many things. And for me, I was pretty stuck. It took me at least 5 journey experiences. I had some huge breakthroughs with some of my early the healing retreats and the plant medicine stuff. Huge breakthroughs in terms of breaking down my having an ego death, so to speak, which was important. Reconnecting with God in a really beautiful, powerful way. But even there, I had some really ingrained habits that were not serving me, and I was still incredibly tied to negative relationships that were not building me up. And it took me a while to learn to love myself enough and respect myself to attract healthy relationships in my life. And I'm incredibly proud of you for the progress I've seen you make, and super excited for our friendship moving forward.
Well, me too, and thank you for doing what you do, because like I never would have been. I heard of people and knew of people that were going to plant-based medicine retreats, and my mind was just like, well, that's for them. That's not for me. I don't need that. But what occurred to me is, like, when there was something, Paul, about you when we met, and you said it from the very beginning, but I knew that you were a special soul. That and we developed a friendship quickly. And you're somebody that I trust. And when you shared with me your story about your financial and business success, and then you shared with me that you've had failed marriages and children that weren't speaking to you, it hit me. It's like when we met, I was just recently divorced, and not for the first time, and having a challenging relationship, and so I realized it was time for me to heal, and at first I still wasn't even sure what it was I needed to heal from, because I didn't see it, and now that I've been here twice, like, I see so many things clearly, and I feel transformation happening, and I feel like I'm so excited about where the future is going to lead me.
What's interesting is that I just realized as we were talking that Tony Robbins event that I went to, where I decided to focus on something other than money, I decided to focus on that relationship. I had already done 3 plant-based medicine experiences up to that. And that's what had changed my heart enough to say, I want to change. Now, what was interesting is as I wrote down my relationship with, I actually wrote my relationship with, and I wrote my wife's name. Looks like this. My wife at the time, right? Her name was Rocio. My relationship with Rocio is, and this is how Rocio shows up for me, and this is how I show up for her. And then about 20 minutes into it, I had this overwhelming feeling that said, Paul, if she chooses to be that woman, then that's her choice. She can choose to be that woman, but do not try to force somebody else's free will. Change that to the woman in my life. This is how I show up for the woman in my life. This is how she treats my kids. This is how, all of these details of the woman in my life, because then if she chooses to walk that road, great. That's her choice. But I'm not going to allow myself to get pulled back by somebody else's freedom of choice. And so, that was a huge breakthrough for me. Knowing, even looking back, I could have made it work with my first wife if we both chose to change and work through what we needed to. Now, I'm incredibly grateful today that those didn't work out, actually, because I'm so incredibly happy. I literally cannot imagine my life being happier in a more fulfilled relationship than what I have now with Autumn Vanessa. And so, but what I learned from that is just like where you're at right now, is you respecting yourself enough to say, this is how my relationships look like going forward. And energetically, what will happen is either whoever's in your life will choose to be that person, or you will move here and they will choose differently. It's not like, hey, you have to change. You simply choose, this is what I want, and I'm changing, and energetically that will bring into resonance.
And that's the work that I'm in right now, and it's so exciting.
Yeah.
It's so liberating. It's so freeing. It's transformational work. Yeah.
Super proud of you. Super proud of you. We had a beautiful, beautiful experience last night.
We did.
And It was very profound, and I could feel it. I could feel the transition. Sometimes you're not going to sit out and see rainbows and all kinds of crazy stuff. Sometimes the most powerful change is that still small voice of truth and knowing and peace, saying, okay, I get it now. I'm just a little bit of a change in perspective. We even talked about last night how, we sit here and all of us do this. All of us are like, oh, my parents did this to me. Every single person. My parents did this. Well, guess what? I believe that we actually chose our parents before we came here. And we look down and we're like, okay, you guys can teach me everything. All of the good, all the bad, and everything else has created who we are today. And we can choose to blame, or we can choose to be grateful for everything that we learn from our parents, from our family, for everything else. And sometimes it's just a change of perspective.
That perspective is a huge perspective, because it's so easy to say, well, my mother didn't do this, or my father didn't do that, or they did this and it was bad, or they should have done this. Or even like in business, when I first read Robert Kiyosaki's books, I was angry at my parents for not teaching that to me, right? And there's so many examples of that. My mother, instilled in me the skills to achieve, but she wasn't nurturing. And, I don't ever remember growing up in my family being told I was loved, or being told that she was proud of me. It was always like, you could do better. You could do better. I remember I was second in my class, and my mother said, if you didn't get that B-, you would have been first. And all I wanted to hear was, I'm so proud of you, Brad. I'm so proud of you. You did such a good job.
And as we look back, though, a lot of that's what drove us, right? And just feeling grateful for it. I do not remember my father saying the words, I love you, once as I was growing up. In fact, the very first time I remember those words coming out of his mouth is when I was leaving for a 2-year service mission, and he was speaking at that farewell, and he said, he wasn't even talking to me, he was talking to the audience, and I want Paul to know that I'm proud of him and I love him. And I'm like,
wow.
That was the first, I was 18 years old, right? Yeah. Now, at the same time, he expected me to get good grades. He expected me to be successful. I'd never get in trouble. It was just, he was super disappointed if I came home with a B-. But I never got a lot of praise with an A.
Right.
I was expecting. I'm like, and I remember I was 23 years old, and it was funny. I called him up and I said, Dad, is it better for me to keep making payments on my car, or is it better for me just to pay it off cash? It started out with me saying, Dad, I need some financial advice. He goes, okay, good, right? Yeah. And then I asked him that question, and then he says, you have enough money to pay it off? Yeah. I have my business that I've been building, and I've got enough. Go ahead and pay it off. That's great, So all of a sudden, I kind of moved up. And then, like 6 months later, I ended up buying a Cadillac. Now, he had sold his Cadillac when he got married and had kids, and had never bought another one. So I bought one. It was beautiful, and so I bought this cat, and I flew one of my workers out to go pick it up. It was in, it was in Nevada somewhere, and drove it and whatever else. What was funny is that the next week we were up at the cabin. We were literally painting the cabin, right? We were painting the rooms of the cabin. My dad asked my opinion as to what color paint should be in this room. He never asked my opinion. 23 years he didn't ask my opinion. But now that I had some money and whatever, and so I could look back on my life and I could say, oh, my dad this. I have a wonderful relationship with my father. And I'm so grateful that he expected success in me. I'm not sitting here going, oh, he never hugged me. Now, I did realize that I had some behaviors that I was trying to fill an emotional hole but I'm not sitting there, I don't sit there in the shower thinking, oh, my dad wasn't emotionally available to me. No, I'm grateful for who he is, the example that he taught, but that wouldn't have happened. I still carried some of that pain for a long time. It wouldn't have happened if I hadn't had those emotional transformations that came from the retreats.
Yeah, and the first retreat I did with you in November, 3 weeks later, my dad had a stroke. And well, before that, my relationship with my parents was every time I would call home, I would talk to my mother. I was very close with my mother. She was the one whose love I craved the most and approval I craved the most. So I would call home for years. My dad would answer the phone. Hey, Brad, how's the weather down there? Hey, the Steelers, I grew up in Pittsburgh. Hey, the Steelers won. The Pirates are terrible. The Penguins are going to the playoffs. Here's your mother. And that was the relationship I had with my dad. And when my mother passed, the blessing in that was that I started to develop a relationship with my father. I took him on a dream vacation. We became closer. But it wasn't really until he had this stroke that I really started to love my father for who he was and for what, and not have, some anger and blame for what he didn't do or how he didn't show up for our family. And it's just really happened with the retreat I did with you, the stroke that he had, and since that event, I've been up to Pittsburgh to see him, and he's still not fully recovered. He can't take care of himself right now. He doesn't have his full cognitive ability, and I'm so grateful for my dad, and I'm so grateful for the things that I learned from him, and the distinction of like choosing to believe that we select our parents because of what we need to learn and experience in this life is a huge paradigm shift.
It was.
Yeah, it's a huge paradigm. It's a huge shift. And so I would just encourage, everybody listening, even if you're not fully on board with saying, yeah, I know for sure that we pick our parents, just imagine the possibility that you picked your parents and what lessons could be learned from that. Like why did you have this mother and why do you have this father? And what learnings are available to you from that? And the learnings could be the things, the positive attributes that you got from them that made you somewhat, whatever it is, successful. Or it could be the things that you didn't get that you need to get.
Absolutely. There's the theme of liberating humanity is, in the beginning it was just helping children achieve freedom, talking about the rescue missions, etc. But in reality, if we're ever going to solve child trafficking, if we're ever going to solve global hunger, if we're ever going to solve domestic abuse, all these issues in our world, we need to elevate global consciousness. We need to help people heal. We need to change our perceptions of our past. We need to release toxic energy in our own life that is creating these things. And I have seen a shift in you in that way just within the last few months. A few months ago, you would be signing up for, hey, let's do this party on this yacht with whoever's there, whatever else. And you really have come to this place of clarity as to what you want, what brings you true peace and joy in your life. And I see that progression in a beautiful way. And that's really, we sit here. So many people have gone through a very similar background with, parents that we had that did this or that, and they can sit and blame, or they can choose to say, what did I learn from that? How did it motivate me to be the best version of myself? I mean, I've had people who were sexually abused as children, people who were trafficked and whatever, but chose to be protectors, chose to make a positive impact rather than taking their trauma and passing that on to their own children or creating a more negative world. And so that's really what this is about. is what did you learn from your childhood that helped you create the success that you had? What are the principles that you chose in your life that brought you to this amazing place of financial abundance, abundance of amazing people that you have created positive impacts in their lives, and friends who absolutely love and respect you? That's more valuable than all the money right there.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you for spending this time today. And I'm super excited to be on your podcast. So when we can do the reverse, you can ask questions to me, and we can even put this one on yours if you want to.
I'm so excited for that. Yeah, we'll do that shortly.
So for our audience that would love to find you, maybe come to a conference or follow you online and whatnot, where can they find you online, and where can they find out more about you?
Well, I spend way too much time on Instagram, and I have some bots, but I still respond to all my direct messaging.
You've gone from like 14,000 to 120,000 in a few
crazy.
months.
I've really leveled up my Instagram. So it's just BRAD SUMROK, and it's on Instagram. There's no other underscore, punctuation, anything. There's a blue check mark. My website is also BRADSUMROK.com. I guess there's a www in front of that, if people don't know that by now.
I wish I had the paulhutchinson.com. Some doctor in Seattle has it or something.
Right?
I'm like, crap, I missed that one. I'd do Paul Hutchinson official or something like that.
Okay.
But so just bradsumrok.com.
Well, I don't think there's many Sumroks out there, and that's why, as we started the show, some rock and some don't.
That's awesome.
And you rock, Paul.
You rock, brother. Super grateful for your time. Thank you for joining us. Share this with other people, and get this positive messages out to the world.